Well, we got to the airport and it was so hot, even in December. It was so hot. I remember President Klein saying that we were in the middle of a cold front right now, but we're all sitting there sweating bullets. Like, it's cold right now? What? And we went to transfer meeting and I met my companion and she was Colombian and she didn't speak a word of English. So I just did my best. But we were at a chapel for transfer meeting the next day and I met her and we got on a bus, this like little, they call them rapititos. It's like a really large van, like a 20-person van, but they're buses. And we got on one and we stopped at a grocery store to just buy some quick snacks to eat on the bus to our area because it was going to be an 8-hour bus ride to get to my first area. And I remember we were in this little bus and we pulled up to the Mirna bus station. And I vividly remember it was raining and you pull up to the bus station and all of a sudden people start crowding around the bus and they're like banging on the windows and they're shouting. And I had no idea what was going on and I was so terrified. I was like, I'm in a third world country and people are yelling and I have no idea what's going on right now. And then after a while you just get used to it because they're actually selling things. Like you just open the window and you give them the cash and they'll give you a bottle of water or some fruit or like some desserts, whatever it is they're selling. And so that took some getting used to. But I got off the bus and I just remember standing there in the rain and it was muddy, like it wasn't paved. And I remember worrying about my bags getting muddy, just waiting for the bus to come. So I got on the bus and went home and it's just different. Like you see on the district, those videos and they have like a nice kitchen and they have like couches and a telephone. And we don't have any of that in Honduras. Our kitchen's like a mini fridge, a sink that may or may not have running water in it, and a hot plate. And then the living room just has like one table with 2 chairs in it. And so it's just very simple. And it took some getting used to. Like my first month of Honduras was probably the hardest month of my whole mission. Getting used to the food and just the culture and the cleanliness. Like it's just not the same. Like there was an anthill growing on my desk. So I was just like smashing ants all the time while I studied. And I got used to eating beans every day. I was sick for like a month, just trying to adjust to all the food and everything. So it was kind of stressful. Sometimes I wished I could like get sick. Not sick enough that I had to go home, but sick enough that they had to reassign me somewhere in America. But once you got used to it, it was all good. So the Honduras San Pedro Sula East Mission is the northern coast of Honduras. Like Honduras is kind of a triangle like this. And so my mission starts like here and goes down like this. But this whole eastern part over here is all, there aren't any paved roads over there. It's all like indigenous Indians who speak a different language. So there aren't any missions or missionaries or like the church over there. So it's mostly just this northern coast right here. So it's beautiful right along the beach. And there are probably 4 or 5 stakes in one district, which should become a stake soon. And then 2 or 3 branches of the mission. And the wards usually have anywhere from like 80 to 150 people. There's a couple that have like 200, but I also served in a branch that only had like 50 people in it, so that was a bit different of an experience. The nearest temple is in Tegucigalpa, Honduras. That temple opened right before I got there, like March 2013. So it's like, if this is my mission, the temple's like down here in Tegus, which is the capital of Honduras. So none of the missionaries in my mission ever got to go there because it's like 4 hours bus ride in the nearest area and like 15 in the furthest area. So we never went there, but most wards will try and go there every couple months. And I had 5 areas. My first one was Olanchito, which is just this tiny little town. It's probably 2 miles from one end to the other. But the branch there is very strong. There's actually 2 branches there and they're both really big. It's amazing. And then my second area was in Tela, which is right on the coast. My apartment was like 10 minutes from the beach. And that city also has 2 small branches in it. They have like 100 people in them now. And then my third area was Santa Rita, which is more inland. It's probably like 2 hours, 3 hours from the coast. And that's another pretty small town. That was probably one of the poorer towns that I served in, and they have a big ward of like 100, 120 people in there. Then my fourth area was in the city of La Ceiba, which is over on the coast again, and that's one of the bigger towns in Honduras. It's probably the second, well, one of the bigger towns in my mission. So that's the one town where you can go get like Wendy's and Pizza Hut and all these American things that you've been missing. But that area was Las Colinas. And then my fifth area was only like 15 minutes away in Las Acacias. So it was the same town, but a different area. In my experience, people in Honduras, the culture of their emotions is a larger spectrum than Americans. Like, I don't know how to explain it. A Honduran will learn to love you more easily. They're so friendly. Like, we met this woman on the street once, and we just walked up to her, and we were like, "Hola, hermana, like, ¿cómo está?" And she ran up and was like, "Oh, hermanas," and like gave us these big giant bear hugs. Like, "How are you doing? Come in, sit down, let me get you some water." And I looked at my companion and I was like, "Do we know this woman?" And she was like, "No, I've never seen her before in my life." Like, they're so friendly and they're so wonderful, but the spectrum's bigger, so it's bigger on the other end too. So they also get offended more easily. Like, it's kind of sensitive. Like, if you don't finish all of the food a woman gives you, like, she might not ever invite you to eat in their home again. So you do kind of have to be careful, but it's also really wonderful because they're just the most friendly, kind, giving people. Like, one time this guy gave us a free taxi ride. We just looked at him and we're like, "We really need to go to this place really quickly, but we don't have any money." And he was just like, "Okay, happen, I'll give you a ride," and just gave us this free taxi ride. Like, it was so nice. And they're pretty casual there, like, as far as time and things go. They're sitting around relaxing all the time. They have hammocks everywhere. They're late for everything. Like, we just knew if we're having a ward activity at 6, we'll tell everyone to be there at 5:30 and hope we can get started by 6:15. So you have to adjust for that sometimes, but it happens. Keeping an appointment with them, like when you make an appointment to come back and teach them, is very difficult because they're very casual with their time. They don't normally commit to things or plan things. So we'll have an appointment, like we'll teach someone a lesson, and then we'll pull out our planners and be like, "Can we come back Thursday at 3? Would that be cool?" And they're like, "Hermanas, I have no idea what I'm doing Thursday at 3. I might be here. I might be out running errands. I might be at my sister's house. Like, who knows what I'll be doing Thursday at 3? And I just think, you'll be here with us getting a lesson because we're going to make an appointment. Like, they don't necessarily have the same concept that we do of like, okay, the hermanas are coming at 3, so I'm going to run all my errands in the morning, and I'm going to go visit my sister later in the evening. Like, they don't plan ahead much. So it can be kind of frustrating, like, I don't know how to teach this person. But sometimes then it's really nice, because if you need like a backup plan or something falls through, like, you can just show up at their house and they're there and they're willing to talk to you because they don't mind if you show up unannounced. But they're also just very, they're very Christ-like people. They're very kind. Like, they're mostly Protestant Christians, I think. Maybe like half are Protestant Christians and half are Catholic. But because of that, it's very easy to teach them the gospel of Jesus Christ. You might not get them all baptized, but you can teach them all. They're always very open to listen about the words of Christ. They rarely ever turn you away if you just say, "We have a message about Jesus Christ." The weather in Honduras is really warm. Like, when it's in the dry, hot part of the year, you wake up at 6:30 and you're like already sweating buckets. Well, there was this one day in Santa Rita. It was probably October, November, and December are the wettest months. That's November, it's raining like all day, every day. And I remember we had walked up this hill and we're on this road and it was just muddy and gross, like the whole city is when it rains. It's really muddy. And I could hear rain or some sort of rumbling or something, and I was trying to figure out what it was because I was like, I'm hearing this rain, but I don't feel the rain. And we kept walking, and all of a sudden I started seeing it, and all of a sudden I walked into the rain. Like here in Utah, it starts slowly and then gets heavier. And it was a weird experience to just be standing here and see that like 2 feet in front of me, it's pouring down. And then all of a sudden walk into it and it's just like this torrential downpour. I'd never experienced that here. I brought a rain jacket, and you might find use for it, but as like the elders need rain jackets, but as a sister I usually just used an umbrella because it's so hot that even though it's rainy and you want to stay dry, the extra heat of the rain jacket I felt wasn't worth it. And they just got a new mission president, so I don't know if this has changed, but my mission president let the sisters wear sandals. So we'd buy like thick hiking sandals, like Tivas or Chacos, and wear those around. Because if you just wear flats like these or something like that, it's miserable. You need good sturdy shoes. But the thing I liked about sandals is that if your feet get wet, they dry faster. Like you're not stuck in wet shoes getting all blistery and wrinkly. But with the church's announcement that sisters can wear pants in some missions, my mission was one of those. So sisters might want to bring pants. And try to bring things you don't really need to layer. I mean, lots of times as sister missionaries, you want things you can layer so that you can mix and match everything. But you don't want that in Honduras because it's so hot. I did get pretty cold in like November, December, because it does get down to like 60 degrees at night, which isn't that cold, but when you're used to it being 100, I'm like shivering the whole month. So I did bring like some cardigans, like light ones that I wore occasionally. Staying safe. In my mission, the missionary handbook says to be home at 9. In my mission, usually elders were home at 9 and sisters were home at 8, so that we weren't out after dark after a while. And mostly just, like, if you're worried about staying safe or anything, I would ask the bishop of whatever area you're in. And I did that lots of times when I got to a new area. I just asked him, like, what are some areas that we as sisters should stay away from? Or maybe go over there during the day, but not at night. Just ask around. We need to be careful because people will usually tell you that that neighborhood over there is super dangerous, but the one that we live in isn't that dangerous. And then you'll go over there and they'll be like, no, that neighborhood's super dangerous and this one's safe. So you have to be careful about who you ask about that. But I don't know, just find ways to do your hair that are up that you like, because it's so hot. You don't want your hair down very often. Like, I didn't even bring a blow dryer or anything. I didn't even worry about it. The food of Honduras is pretty interesting. Like, people assume it'll be like Mexican food, and it's not. Mexican food's like really spicy, and Honduran food I feel is very, very bland. And in Honduras, it's very common for the missionaries for lunch, instead of making their own lunch, they'll actually find a woman, maybe a member or an investigator, to make them lunch every day. So you just pay her a certain amount every couple weeks and she'll make you lunch every day, which I thought was really nice. I loved not having to make my own lunch, but it also meant I had to eat whatever she gave me. So I remember my first area, my first cocinera, it was just plain white rice, boiled red, I think they're red kidney beans, and then some sort of meat. And when she cooked, the meat was seasoned the same way every single day. So it was basically the same lunch every day. And I didn't like it. I'm not really before my mission, I was not a big rice and beans fan, especially if they're just boiled. But the food that's most, how do I say this in English? The first, like, typical food is the baleada. And the baleada is a flour tortilla that they make from scratch. And then you put refried beans and some cheese on there. And then you fold it in half and you eat it. And they eat that every single day for breakfast and dinner, but they never eat it for lunch. But they're so delicious. I ate 464 of them on my mission. And they're my favorite Honduran food. That and tajadas. They take plátano, how do you say that in English? Plantains. And they slice them and then they deep fry them and you put sour cream on them and it's so good. But then there's another type of tajada that's super common and they make it from guineo. And in Honduras, guineo means an unripened banana, a green, hard banana. And they eat them all the time because they're super cheap. So if they make them into tajadas, they'll do the same thing where they slice it and deep fry it. And then they put like shredded cabbage and meat and like a sauce on it, and it's delicious. And other times they'll take the guineo and they just cut it in half and then they boil it and then they use it as a side dish for your lunch, and it's disgusting. It's the worst thing I've ever eaten in my life. It's like dry and it's flavorless, but you eat it like every day. And it's a big joke around the mission, like, why do they eat guineo when they could just wait for it to be ripe and eat a banana? But I don't know, you get used to the food. And there's a really famous soda, it's banana flavored soda. And at first you kind of hate it, and then eventually it grows on you and you think it's delicious. So if you've ever heard of a place where I can buy banana soda, let me know, because I've never found a place here. Obviously I miss the people. We message on Facebook sometimes and I miss just being able to talk to them and see them, and I miss some of the food, like the baleadas and the tajadas, but the rice and boiled beans and the guineo I don't miss. But I miss the culture most. Like in Honduras, there's like vendors on the street everywhere. Like you can buy a watch or fruit or clothing or a bootlegged movie or anything, just like there on the street. Like you're walking down the side of the road and some guy's just like, hey, do you want a coconut? And you're like, sure. And he pulls out his machete and he puts a straw in it, and we're just like walking down the street drinking coconut. And I wish we had that here. I think it'd be really cool. I mean, they speak Spanish just like most other Latin countries. They do have a weird accent. They drop their S's and they put in a J. You call it a jota. Because in Spanish, J makes an H sound, like a H. So, like, my mission was the Honduras San Pedro Sula East mission. Well, Este mission. But they'll be like, Honduras San Pedro Sula Este. Because they drop the S. Or like the word entonces. They'll just be like, entonces? Like, entonces? And so it takes, like, you have to learn to listen for it. Like, at first, I felt frustrated sometimes because, like, I know what the word entonces means, but I just didn't understand that that was the word they were saying to me because of the accent. And not, like, some people have a stronger accent than others. And they use vos. Like in Spanish, you can conjugate you informally and formally. And as missionaries, we always speak in the formal. But in Honduras, they use this thing called vos, which is like an extra informal way of speaking. And then they conjugate the verb differently when they use vos. So it's similar, and like I remember realizing, like, I hear this word all the time and I know what it means, but I have no idea where that conjugation comes from because you won't find it in any textbook because it's just slang. But so once you learn to listen for that and you listen for the jota, it becomes a lot easier to understand them. But all the missionaries speak Spanish. There are two other tribal dialects. There's Mosquito and Garifuna. But the missionaries don't ever go into that part of the country, so they don't ever really learn it. Well, when I got robbed, it was fairly low-key. My mission president actually kept track of how many times each missionary got robbed. But my companion and I were walking down the street, and it was probably 7 or 8 at night, but it was dark. And we saw a drunk man coming toward us, so we crossed to the other side of the street. And then he crossed to the other side of the street with us. We're like, and we realized we knew him. He was actually the brother of a member that we knew. So he came up and he had a newspaper in front of him. And he looked at me and was like, give me 10 lempiras or I'm going to shoot you because I have a 9mm shotgun. And he was saying it in Spanish, but I think he said 9mm shotgun in English. But I don't remember. But I remember thinking, like, I don't know a lot about guns, but I'm pretty sure a 9mm shotgun's not a thing. But he's drunk, so he might still have a gun and not know which kind of gun he has, because he was holding up a newspaper. And the thing is, 10 lempiras is the currency they use there. 10 lempiras is like nothing. I could buy like one baleada with that. Like, you can't even buy a full meal with it. I don't know why he was robbing me for 10 lempiras. But, so I pulled out a 5 and gave it to him. In hindsight, that probably wasn't a good idea. But in my mind, I was like, he's drunk. He won't notice that I'm saving myself 5 lempiras. And he pulls it out and he's like, this is only 5. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll get you your other 5. And my companion looks at him and she's like, hermano, like, don't you remember us? Like, we've met before. We're the missionaries. Like, remember, like, we're nice people. You shouldn't rob us. And he's like, no, I want my 10 lempiras. And my companion's like, it's rude to rob people, you know. And he's just like, I didn't rob anyone. And I was like, you robbed me just now. And he was like, well, fine. Do you want your 10 lempiras back? And I was like, yes, I do. And then he looked at me and was like, well, do you want to get shot between the eyes? But at this point, in all of his talking, he had moved his hands. And it turned out it was just his hand, like this, behind the newspaper. He didn't even have a gun. But he, like, held it right up by my face, like his finger right here. Like, do you want to get shot between the eyes? And I just looked at my companion and was like, hermano, let's go. Keep the 10 lempiras, we're out. And that was it. In my 4th area in Las Colinas, my companion and I got whitewashed in there. The area had been closed for about a month and then reopened. So we got in there and it was kind of stressful opening this area back up. And we went to church our very first Sunday and a member said, I have a cousin that I want you guys to meet. He's interested in learning more about the gospel. And we went to his house later that day and he looks like a thug. Like, he's got tattoos, t-shirts, super baggy pants. Like, he looks like a thug. But he's like the sweetest guy. He's amazing. He's actually preparing to serve a mission right now. I think he's like 20 years old at the moment. But we continued to teach him. And we challenged him to be baptized and he accepted, but then wasn't feeling ready, so he pushed his date back a few times. But I remember people telling us that we should not go there and that we should not be anywhere near that house because his family wasn't, that there were some dangerous people. And, you know, when we're in Honduras, I take that pretty seriously when you tell me that those people are dangerous. I had knocked doors a few times and people opened the door with a gun or anything like that. So I thought about it and thought, no, this kid's really great, so we need to keep teaching him. And one day we were at dinner, my companion and I were at dinner at a member's house, and somehow he came up and they started talking to us and they were saying that he was not a good person and that he was a thug and that they did not want him to be a member of their ward and that we should not be teaching him and that he would not provide a good image for our ward and for the church. And I just cried because I just thought that is so not Christ-like. And it's interesting to hear those things from members of the church because we like to think that all members of the church are these wonderful people and that we're all very Christ-like, when the truth is some members of the church aren't very nice and some missionaries are disobedient and some people who aren't members of the church are great people. And I feel like that's something we need to learn as members of the church and accept and work on. And so even though this family of members didn't like him, I just thought, whatever, we were teaching him. And he got baptized right before my companion and I both got transferred out of the area. And so it was really great to see him and see him progress and to know that he truly understood the atonement. I remember asking him one day why he wanted to be baptized. And I asked everyone who got baptized that, like, why do you actually want this? And he looked at me and he said, because I've made some mistakes in my life and I want to fix them. And I want to repent and I want to grow to know my Savior better. And I just thought in that moment that he was more prepared to be baptized than anyone I had ever met on my mission. That he truly understood the atonement and what the purpose of the gospel brings. And that's what we should all be striving for. We should all be striving to have that level of desire for the atonement in our lives. And he was writing me the other day about how he wants to go on a mission, and I asked him why he wanted to serve a mission, and he just said, because I want to help people experience the gospel and this gift that you guys were able to bring to me. And it was just one of those moments where you think, this is why I came on a mission. My advice on companionships would just be to feel charity for them, to find a way to love them, but also be able to communicate in a very calm way. That you need to be able to talk about things. If you have some sort of issue or some sort of problem with how you're interacting with each other or how you're doing the work, like, as people, we should be able to have the life skills to be able to communicate frustrations or problems or issues without getting upset or without having a fight. And as a companionship, I feel like there's a lot of opportunities to have differing opinions on how we should teach this person, or what should we teach, or should we go talk to this person or that person, or where should we go. There's a lot of opportunities for throwing around ideas and accepting an idea or rejecting an idea. And so I feel like we just need to be able to communicate calmly and always strive to feel love for people. Chicken gizzards and iguana. The baleada. Americans are too afraid of being dirty. Like, if your cookie falls on the floor, just eat it. It's fine. It might have a little bit of dirt on it, but that won't kill you. But also just that the church is true, and that we have to, in all aspects of our lives, we have to be constantly striving for improvement. That if you ever get lazy and become idle, that's why the Book of Mormon warns us against idleness so much. That if you ever become idle and stop striving for improvement, I believe you'll end up going backwards. You'll get stuck. So whether that's school or your job or your gospel or creating better relationships with the people in your lives, we need to be constantly striving for improvement, because that's why God sent us here. Probably just that first month of my mission. I got to Honduras mid-December, so right before Christmas, and just adjusting to the food and the culture and feeling so frustrated that I couldn't really express myself very well to my companion and express my ideas. I felt like I had all these ideas of what we could do and how we could find people and help the ward, and I didn't know how to say it. Like, how to say, what if we did this? And just the food, I was sick for like a month. I'm not super sick, but I wasn't feeling very good for like the first whole month. So that was probably the hardest thing, just adjusting that first month. Once I got adjusted and just accepted, like, this is how life is now, I was usually pretty okay. There was this one family I met in Tela, my second area. They're one of my favorite families I met on my mission, La Familia Sosa. And we were teaching them, and it was the husband and the wife, and they had 3 daughters. And they were interested in the gospel. They had family members who were members, and they had been reading the Book of Mormon and trying to keep most of their commitments. They were pretty like a golden family. But there was just something holding them back. And one day we brought the Relief Society president with us to teach them a lesson and just have her help us. And I remember her talking, she spoke specifically to the husband. And she spoke about how her husband is not a member of the church. And she spoke about how she loves him and how he's a wonderful man and he's a wonderful father to their children. But that she's not sealed in the temple to him, and that he doesn't have the priesthood. And she just spoke to him on a altar and just said, like, you have this opportunity to become a member of this church and receive the priesthood. And you have an opportunity to be able to bless your family and bless others through that. And that our Heavenly Father wants to bless you and your family. And I just remember the whole room was crying. And I just felt the Spirit so strongly. And I just remember thinking in that moment how grateful I am that I have a father who holds the priesthood, and that I have a family who are members, and that I'm just so grateful for my Heavenly Father and for this gospel, and just realizing that this is the reason I came on a mission. So that this family, who's now sealed in the temple, and they all hold church callings, and their daughter's working on her personal progress, and that this gospel can bless their lives and bless the Relief Society president's life. And yeah. I don't know. I mean, obviously you grow in the gospel, you grow in your testimony. And I think I learned to be more patient and to have more charity for people, and not, sometimes we use charity as a way to mean helping people, or like giving charity, like donating money or something. And if you look in the Bible dictionary, it specifically says that that's not what charity means, that charity is the highest, purest, most Christ-like form of love. And I feel like that's really something I learned and something I grew in, was learning to, I mean, I'm still working on it, but learning to see people the way God sees them, and learning to just love all people and try and get along with them. And and stop judging people so much. Just be more patient and kind with them. I remember one time in Tela, we were walking down the street I was walking with my companion, and there was a woman sitting on her front porch playing with her baby. And so we went up to start talking to her, and we asked her how old her baby was, and we asked her if we could teach her, and she was like, well, not now, but you can come back another day. So we left her a Plan of Salvation pamphlet and made an appointment to come back, and left. And then the day of the appointment came, and we were on divisions with the sister training leaders. So I went back to the appointment with one of the sister training leaders, and the woman wasn't home. So we left and we went to our backup plan. And then it was like a week later, I was walking with my companion, and we passed that house. And I said, Hermana, it is too often that we go to a house, we make an appointment to come back, we go back, they're not home, and then we never end up going back. We just get busy doing other things. Like, we need to stop doing that. We need to go back until we're sure that they're not going to get baptized and that this won't progress. So she was like, okay, let's go back. So we walked up to the house. The woman wasn't there, but her brother-in-law was. And my wonderful companion was like, well, sir, can we teach you? So we went inside and we taught him and his mother. And his mother was not interested at all, but he was. So we went back and we taught him, and we challenged him to be baptized, and he accepted. And he was the absolute most prepared person I have ever met. He had lived with his aunt in Minnesota for a while. He lived with her for like a year, and she's a member of the church. And the missionaries in Minnesota ate at their house once a week for the entire year. And apparently they never talked to him. They never asked if he wanted to take the lessons. They never asked if he wanted to get baptized. They never asked him if he was a member. And we were talking about him once, and he was just like, they must have assumed I was already a member or something, because the missionaries in Minnesota never once asked to talk to me. So he, like, before we even met him, he was already interested in the gospel. And so he got baptized super quickly, and now he's in the branch presidency and is just doing so well. And it was just amazing to see this passion he has for the gospel and how happy it makes him. And even though sometimes it's hard because his family aren't members, his mother and his brother, but just to see the faith that he had and the determination he had that he was going to get baptized even if his family didn't like it. There was one time in Olanchito, my first area, and I was there with my first companion, and I met this boy who was probably 14 or 15. And we started teaching him at the pulperia that he worked at. A pulperia is like a little store that people will run like out of their house or something, so you can go buy water or candy or diapers or rice or whatever. So we started teaching him, and he seemed really interested. He said that he didn't live with his parents at the time, but he said, when I did live with my parents, I've seen this book before. I think my parents were members of your church. And I remember we left him, I think we wanted him to read 2 Nephi 31. And he read like 31 and 32. He read like 4 or 5 chapters, and it was amazing. And then school started again. And he's only 15, so he goes back to school. And we never saw him again. We could never find him. He was just always busy doing something. And my companion left. I got a new companion. He was like, and I told her, like, there's this kid we can go try and find, but we haven't seen him in like a month or two. And I remember one day praying in my personal prayer at night, like, Heavenly Father, I just want to find him. Even if we can't really teach him, I just want to find him again and like figure out what's going on. And that day we found him. He just happened to be home. And we talked to him and we taught him one lesson, and then we couldn't find him again after that. It was just that one day. But I just remember feeling such a strong testimony of like, God heard my prayer. Like, I asked for us to find that boy, and we found him. And then I left that was probably like February or March that happened. I left in April, so it's probably March. I left in April, and then I got an email from my companion in June or July saying that he was getting baptized, that she and her new companion had continued teaching him. And so I was just so grateful for that prayer, that God had given us that one extra day of contact just to keep us in his mind and like keep the progress going. The Honduras San Pedro Sula East Mission is the best mission in the world. You'll hear other people say that other missions are better, but it's not. It's scary sometimes, and it's nerve-wracking sometimes to be in a place that's so different, and sometimes it's really dangerous and dirty, but it's wonderful. And if you can learn to love these people, then you'll have the most amazing experience. And I know that as missionaries, we need to feel a desire to preach the gospel and to spread the love of our Heavenly Father and the love of our Savior Jesus Christ. And that if you as a missionary can always keep that in mind and always remember why it is we serve missions, then you'll always be able to be a successful missionary.
When I got to the mission field, the flight there was definitely uneventful, but I remember, obviously, Honduras, San Pedro Sula, the mission is just along the northern coast of all of Honduras, and it is hot and it is humid. And being from Nevada, I was not used to that. I've been in the heat, but not humid heat. And I remember stepping off the plane and just thinking, I'm going to die here. And it is 8 p.m. at night, and it's 90 degrees. And we met the APs and the mission president, and my first mission president, President Veers, I loved him, but man, he was a crazy driver. And I remember they greeted us at the airport, and like I said, it was night, and they had Wendy's for us, and we got in the car and we were kind of eating, and I thought I was going to die. He was driving extremely fast, and that was a very entertaining way to meet the mission president. But another experience that I remember when I first got into the field, like I said, blisteringly hot. I was not prepared for that. And, you know, here in the United States, when it's hot outside, you step inside and you just assume that it's going to be cool because there's going to be AC going. And in Honduras, that is not the case. Some of the nicer houses have air conditioning units, but the AP's house where we stayed for a couple nights was not one of those houses. We just had fans. And so I remember thinking it was so hot and I was just sweating, and it was 8:30 at night and it was so weird. And as soon as I stepped into the AP's house, I expected it to just kind of be relief and it's cool, and it was not. If anything, it was hotter in the house than it was outside of the house, and that was a startling experience for me. But after a day of orientation, we had our our transfer meeting, cambios, and I got my first companion, Elder Garcia, who I loved and who was a great missionary, but he did not speak a lick of English. I actually had a pretty cool story as a side note. He was a convert to the church. He got baptized when he was 18, and he could not read. He hadn't gone very far in school before he dropped out, and he couldn't read, but he loved the missionaries that had taught him and had baptized him, and he really wanted to do that for someone else. And so he asked the missionaries what he needed to do, and they said, well, you can't be a missionary for at least a year, and you would need to be able to read. And so he took a year and a half and did basically third grade through high school and taught himself how to read and was out on a mission. And he was a great missionary. But like I said, as a gringo down in Honduras, my companion didn't speak English. The bishop in our ward did speak English, which I think was a tender mercy for me. But other than that, it was a difficult transition for me. First week in the mission, we were 2 or 3 days in, and I had been following my companion around, and I tried to keep up in the discussions, but you get down to Honduras, and I could understand when other gringos were speaking Spanish at me, but man, when some of those Hondurans got going, I had no idea what was going on, and it was really difficult the first couple days, just to sit there and not really feel like I had anything to contribute. And we'd reach certain points in the lesson, and I could catch keywords to kind of know where my companion was in the lesson, and he'd look at me to say something, and I'd kind of think about it and be like, well, we're in the Great Apostasy, and spout off some canned sentences, and the investigators would ask a question, and I'd be thrown off and have to look at my companion. And I remember on my third day in the mission field, we were walking back at night, and it had been a long day. We'd had a couple appointments fall through, and the ones we had gone to, I just felt like I hadn't contributed anything. And I just remember, just on the way back, I just started to cry, and I was just thinking, I don't know if I can do this. I'm not helping anything. There's no point to this. And I may as well just go home, and there's no point. I remember we got home that night, and I kneeled down to say my prayers, and just all of a sudden I just had this feeling of no, Jake, you can do this, and you need to be down here. And I remember after feeling that, I thought to myself, okay, for some reason I need to be down here, and it didn't get any easier. It's not like I woke up the next day and the gift of tongues had descended and I understood everyone perfectly, but when I had difficult moments in the mission, I kind of looked back at that and said, no, this is where you need to be. And it helped me get through a lot, but especially that first week in the mission, which is hard, but it's worth it, guys. Like I said, I received my mission call in October 2011. I entered the MTC February of 2012 and got into the mission field in April of 2012. At that time, the Honduras San Pedro Sula mission was one mission and had not yet split. So I spent time in both the East and West missions, but once it did split, I ended up in the East. I got to serve in San Pedro Sula itself. I had 2 areas in there, and I served in another large city called La Ceiba. And then in the East mission, I served in 2 areas that were a little smaller. One area called Tela, that was just a beautiful town, and an area called Trujillo, which is about the farthest corner of the mission. So that was an interesting experience to be that far away from everybody. But I started off in San Pedro. It was actually pretty funny. My first area was Chamelecon in San Pedro Sula, and I was not aware of this because, let me back up a little bit. San Pedro Sula has a very high crime rate, and so in my first area in Chamelecon, I was not aware of the fact that it was actually one of the more dangerous areas in the mission. I had known beforehand that crime was high in Honduras, and so I just figured that was how it was. And it was interesting to me once I was out of the area. When I told people that I had been in Chamelecon, everyone was just shocked and wanted to know why I had gone in there, and I had no idea. Ignorance is bliss, I guess. But it was pretty cool. I remember one day we came out of our house, and one of the teenagers that was in one of the gangs down there walked up to us, and he came up to us and said, "Hey, brothers, if you ever have any problems with anyone, you let us know and we'll take care of it." And so I think the missionaries were very blessed. I could say the Lord was looking out for us, and I think the gang members kind of took us in as their own, and we didn't have a lot of problems because people knew that the gang members were behind us. Not to advocate that you should seek them out, but it was definitely a blessing to be able to not have to worry about that. So I started off in Chamelecon, and then I spent time in some areas in the west, down in Copan and Ocotepeque. But then I came up and I served in Tela, and then I moved on to Trujillo, and I finished my time in the Ceiba. San Pedro and the Ceiba, La Ceiba are both bigger cities. And so, like I said, the crime rate's kind of high. And, you have to be careful, but people know you're missionaries, and down in Honduras, they respect that. And so I don't think we had as many problems as other people do. The East Mission actually splits. If I remember right, the line in San Pedro is actually just kind of to the east of San Pedro, is where it splits off. And so we cover from La Lima, which is an area in San Pedro, all the way out to, technically we cover Gracias a Dios, the state way on the western edge, but at least when I was serving there, and as far as I'm aware, that area is not open. So we covered from San Pedro Sula all the way to Colón. Trujillo and Olanchito were the areas that were the farthest away. And it's very narrow, just kind of along that northern border. While I was on my mission, they dedicated the Tegucigalpa Temple, which was a fantastic experience, and it has been such a blessing to the people in Honduras. I know, talking to people that I knew down there, they love having the temple in their own country. Most of there's a good mix of different kinds of ward units. I spent time, my first area and my last area were both large wards with around 200 people that would usually attend a sacrament meeting. My middle areas we were in smaller branches of about 50 to 100 people, and one of my areas, my companion and I were the branch presidency, and there were 20 people in the branch, so it does vary widely, but the church is growing so fast down there. Talking to a number of ward members that I served with, there's a lot of branches being opened and a lot of wards splitting. It was a fantastic opportunity to work down there and be able to be a part of that work, because it is just exploding across the country. The biggest thing that I can say with missionary work down there is just work hard. Like I said, a lot of the people, you already have common ground with them, and the people are so friendly and so nice that it's very easy to find people to talk to. Like I said, the biggest thing is to be able to discern who's willing to actually accept your message as opposed to just listen to you. I had a number of investigators that were great people, and they knew the Bible extremely well, and they loved to talk with us, but we had to stop going because they wouldn't progress. They didn't want to accept things like Joseph Smith in the Book of Mormon. And so I think with the work down there, you have to be careful and make sure that you are finding people who are willing to accept the message of the church and not just necessarily talk about God, because that's something that the people down there love to do, and it's very easy to fall into that. I love Hondurans. I would, if I had the chance, I would move back to Honduras and just live down there. We are here in the United States, we are very solitary people, and we're kind of rude to people that we don't know. It was really hard to adjust that when I came home, because down in Honduras, like I said, they are so open and friendly, and everyone just wants to help each other out. And it was a fantastic place to live because people are just so much fun, and they're so much more laid back and just less. They just don't worry about stuff like we do, you know. And it was great to be able to get to know the people. Like I said, there are so many fantastic people in Honduras that I love with all my heart. So one thing with the culture down in Honduras that is, it's very familial based. A lot of time, I mean, you'll have the grandparents and the parents and the kids all live in the same house or, you know, on the same street, and there's not as much, you know, it's weird for them to really get far away from their family. Obviously they do at times, but it's very familial based, and they just, especially being missionaries with everyone being religious down there, they just adopt you in, and yeah, it's fantastic. I love Honduras. I love the people down there. One thing that was exciting, I've always played soccer since growing up, and going down Honduras, that is all anyone does. Play soccer, watch soccer. When the Honduras national team would play, it was just a surreal experience because everything stopped. And it didn't matter if it was World Cup, if it was just a match, it just stopped. And everyone would leave their doors open because it was hot, and so you need some circulation, and they'd turn their TVs up really loud. And so you could walk down the street, especially in an important game, and you could listen to what was going on in the game just because everyone on both sides had the game going in their house. But it was a fantastic place to serve. People take care of you down there, and people would, you know, you'd go to teach a lesson, and this person that you never met would be bringing you food and things to drink, and it was so great. And I love the people down there. They're the most loving, fantastic people, just welcoming and friendly that I have ever met and had the opportunity to be around. The people down there are fantastic. I love the people of Honduras so much. They are very religious. I think I could count on one hand the number of people that I met in Honduras that said that they did not believe in God. And so it was interesting. I hear about experiences from other missions where they talk about the hardest thing was just getting through the door. But the people down there are so welcoming and so friendly, especially to missionaries. They love to talk to missionaries, most of them, and they respect you. Everyone down there calls each other hermano y hermana. That's just what we called people, and no one had a problem with it. The hard thing down in Honduras was finding people who didn't just want to talk about God, but people who were actually willing to experience that change of heart and experience conversion to the church. Because like I said, everyone down there is religious, and so I remember one night we knocked on a door and we didn't even say anything, and a lady opened the door and her whole family was in there, and she just said, "Oh, are you guys missionaries?" And we said, "Well, yes, we are." And she said, "Well, come on in." And that's just how the people of Honduras are. They are so open and so welcoming. Yeah, most of them are already religious. And so it was very easy to find common ground, just to begin with. But like I said, the difficulty was finding people who were willing to accept Joseph Smith in the Book of Mormon, as opposed to just saying, well, we both believe in God, but who are willing to say, yeah, I believe Joseph Smith was a prophet, and I think the Book of Mormon is true. That was our difficulty, not so much the finding people. Living in Honduras was quite the experience. Like I said, it's very hot and humid. I had never seen a rainstorm like the ones that they get in Honduras. Pretty much everywhere in the mission, you're within 100 miles of the ocean, and so you get a lot of rainstorms that are heavy and roll in fast. I remember one thing I always remember is down there a lot of people just have metal roofs, and you would see these storms roll in and you could hear just this wall of water raining down, and you could hear it hitting the roofs and just coming towards you. And it was really cool when you were under something, but man, that was a terrifying sound when you were in the open, because you knew you were about to get soaked. The housing down there was, again, very different from up here. Obviously, mission apartments are small and inexpensive, so like I said, we never really had air conditioning or anything like that, and a lot of the cities down there have problems with running water to houses, and so a few of my areas we took bucket showers, just because there was enough water pressure to use a shower head. One thing that's very common down there is all houses have this thing called la pila, which is confusing because that's also the word for the baptismal font, but it's not on the houses. You have a pila, which is basically a big concrete basin, and it has a little concrete washboard on one half of it, and then you have the water on the other half. And people down in Honduras use that. That's their washing machine. That's what they use to clean things, do the dishes, all that kind of stuff. And so every house down in Honduras has a pila, even the ones the missionaries were in. And a lot of times guys would actually use those, and after a long day you're kind of sore, and they would fill up the pila and hop in and just kind of soak in it for a little bit, which was nice because there's a lot of walking down there. So that was always a nice way to end the day. Transportation down there, with the struggles with crime and things like that, I only ever had areas that I walked in. The only missionaries in the mission that had a car were the office elders, so the APs and the secretaries, and the rest of us just walked. And then if we needed to travel for, say, a district meeting or to go to the mission home, buses were the way that most people would go. They have taxis down there that some people would use, but those get pretty expensive. So we'd usually, for long distance, they take the charter buses from the U.S. and they send them down there, and so you'd have a large charter bus that would take you. And then in the city, in San Pedro itself, they have these little tiny buses called rapiditos, which are basically just, it's a 12-passenger or 15-passenger van that they've kind of outfitted. And it was one of those experiences where, as someone who is very tall, it was often difficult to ride in the rapiditos because they like to stuff those things as full as they can, and they unfortunately did not appreciate the fact that this gringo was tall and preferred to have some leg room. But yeah, so most of the transportation from city to city is on buses, and other than that, we were walking just about everywhere we went. One thing down in Honduras that you do have to be careful with is, as I've said, the crime rate is high, and so I had a couple experiences We had one time where we came back. It was the day after Christmas. It was on the 26th. And it was a low point because I had just gotten transferred to a new area, which is never fun right before Christmas. But I'd just been transferred, and it was nice because the area I'd been transferred to, they had a family of 4 that was ready to be baptized, and they were going to baptize them on Christmas Day, and it was going to be cool and everything, and we were super excited. And it fell through, as they sometimes do, and it was very hard. And I remember on the 26th, we'd been trying to get a hold of this family that we were going to baptize all day, and they were kind of avoiding us. And about 8 o'clock, we had just gone and just sat on their front porch to wait for them to come home, and they didn't. And so about 8:45, we started to head home, and we got to our house, and my companion went to go unlock the door, and it was bolted from the inside. And we were like, well, that's obviously we didn't do that because we shut the door, and so we couldn't have locked it. And we looked, and I asked my companion if he had left the lights on, and he said, no, I didn't. And we realized someone was in our house, and so we ran over to the neighbor's house and went through their house into their backyard, because down in this neighborhood, all the houses were connected. So we went into their backyard, climbed up onto their roof, and then jumped from their roof down into our yard. And meantime, whoever had been in our house ran out the front door. So we walked in, and they had cleaned us out. Everything was gone. They had taken our money and all of our valuables. And it was really interesting, some of the things that they stole. They took a lot of my companion's clothing because he was a little shorter, so his clothing fit them, and I was lucky enough that they left most of mine. And they had stolen things like our deodorant and our toothpaste, which still to this day was funny to me. But moral of the story is, as I look back in hindsight, don't go into the house if you know someone's in there, because we were extremely blessed and lucky that nothing bad happened. But yeah, we had the biggest thing down there is it is unfortunate. The crime rate is rather high, and I knew a lot of missionaries who had experiences like that. I had one time we were riding the bus home, and a couple of guys got on and robbed everyone on the bus. And the biggest thing to remember in moments like that is don't panic. Like I said, a lot of the people down there are religious and recognize the fact that you are a missionary and don't want to hurt you. Don't panic. Don't do anything silly. Don't be a hero. Give them $5, and they know you're a missionary. They know you don't have a lot of money, so yeah. And obviously, the mission president has better advice for you than that, and so I'll let your future mission president talk to you about that. One thing with Honduras, I was very lucky in this aspect. I got sent to a lot of touristy areas, which is both a blessing and a curse, because Honduras is gorgeous. It's absolutely beautiful. You have the ocean that's right there, and you have rainforests and jungles, and it's just so cool, and there's so many things to do, which as a missionary can be extremely frustrating because you don't have time. That's not what you're there for. And so there were a number of things that I didn't get to do. There are a lot of hikes that are fun. I remember one day as a district we went and hiked a mountain, and we hiked through pineapple fields. This member took us up, that he owned these pineapple fields up in this mountain. And so as we were walking through, he just went through and was just picking pineapples for us, and he had a machete with him and just kind of peeled them right there and gave them to us. And it was fantastic. And like I said, it's a beautiful area. You will never have a lack of things to do for P-Day when you're in Honduras. Oh, Honduras has some fantastic food. So in the north part of Honduras, there's a couple of popular dishes. So the one thing you will eat is the baleada. Practice that word because you are going to eat a lot of them. So what the baleada is, it's basically they just do a flour tortilla, the basic baleada. They do a flour tortilla. They put some refried beans. They put queso fresco, which is just a really salty dried cheese. And then they put mantequilla, which, don't be deceived because it's not butter. It's kind of like a sour cream. So your basic baleada is they do flour tortilla, beans, queso fresco, and mantequilla. And then depending on where you go, they get fancier. You know, they'll put scrambled egg and chorizo or avocado, all kinds of different things. Chicken, you can get all kinds of different things in baleadas, but so good. And you will eat so many because that is the breakfast and lunch meal of choice of Hondurans is a baleada. Yeah, I really miss baleadas. They're so good. Another thing that's very popular and delicious on the northern coast is called pollo con tajadas, which is basically they do fried chicken, and then they'll take plantains and slice them up, kind of like chips, and fry them. So they're basically like banana French fries, which sounds weird, but it's so good. And they'd kind of serve that. They do the chicken and the tajadas, and they do cabbage with kind of a creamy sauce. And we had one sister in my first area that she owned a shop that made pollo con tajadas, and every Tuesday night she'd give us an order of pollo con tajadas for dinner, and we looked forward to Tuesday night because it was so good. The fruit down there is fantastic because up here, a lot of the fruit you're getting from stores is imported from somewhere else. You know, it's had time to age, and it's just not as good. Down there, my first area, we had a banana tree and a mango tree in the front yard. We'd go out for breakfast and chop down a mango, and it was fantastic. They also do one thing that I grew to love that I was not a fan of at the beginning was they'll take plantains that are ripe. So when they make tajadas, they use a green plantain, so it's a little stiffer. But they'll take a ripe one and fry that, and it kind of makes it sweet. And so for dinner, a lot of times they do like those sweet plantains, just with cheese and mantequilla and beans. And when I first got into the mission, that was really weird, and not my favorite. But now that I'm home, I will make that for myself for dessert because it is so good. One weird thing that I struggled with was sopa de mondongo, which is a soup that they make. First of all, I love Honduran food, but it is so hot, and I remember they'd come out with these steaming bowls of soup for lunch, and I'm like, it's 100 degrees outside. Why are you serving me hot soup? And that was hard, but they have one soup that is sopa de mondongo, and it's, if I remember right, it's the stomach of the cow is the meat, which was interesting, and that was one food that I never really grew to love. It was pretty tough and chewy. Jugo de maracuya, which is passion fruit juice, so good. It was fantastic. I loved that. Also, so one thing they have down in Honduras, they don't have big stores like Walmart or Smith's like we do here. Well, they do, but only in big cities, and they were too expensive for the missionaries to go to. What they have down there are pulperias, which is basically someone would just take their living room and they'd knock out a window, and they'd just stock their living room with just little bags of chips, or they'd have beans, and they'd have rice, and they'd have things to cook with. They'd have cookies and just little things, and these things were everywhere. I mean, you'd have pulperias on all the streets, and that was where you'd shop. You'd go to the pulperia, you'd get your, if you're hungry, you'd get a bag of chips. You get your stuff for dinner that night, some tomatoes, beans, whatever. And so that's the main shopping thing is, parents will send their kid down to the nearest pulperia to go get whatever they need for dinner. Another thing that was weird at first that now I can't believe we don't do here in the United States was a lot of their drinks came in bags. For example, they'd have just bags of water that were about this big, and it'd just be water, and you'd bite the corner off and then just drink it. And I don't know why we don't do that here. It's so much easier, and you don't have to deal with cups, and it's just easier. But one thing that I know a lot of people love that I really struggled with, we had is arroz con leche, which is just, it's rice and milk. I remember I had an investigator that they gave us a big bowl of arroz con leche, and it was so good, and we ate all of it, and it was a big mistake. It was right after lunch. It was a hot day. I got really sick, and the problem is then my body just said, you shouldn't eat that anymore. And it wasn't even that I didn't like it, it was just I couldn't eat it. I would just gag on it, which was really hard because people like to serve that. So don't eat a lot of arroz con leche in the afternoon. One blessing I had from the mission was the opportunity to learn Spanish, which is a beautiful language that I love. It was a little difficult at first to get a grip on. I remember when I was in high school, we had, my high school offered Spanish or German, and I really wanted to take German. My grandpa spoke German, and I just thought it was a cool language. That's what I wanted to take. But my dad told me, no, you should take Spanish. It's going to be a more useful language for you. And I remember telling my dad, no, it's not. I really want to take German. And he said, no, you need to take Spanish. I told him, I said, you watch. I'm going to get my mission call, and it's going to be to Germany, and I'm going to be speaking Spanish. And he said, all right, I'll take you up on that bet. And I remember when I opened my mission call and said where I was going, my dad leaned in and said, the first thing he said to me was, well, hey, Jake, sounds like you're not going to be speaking German, are you? Which was funny to me, but he was right. High school Spanish was definitely a blessing. I came in with, I couldn't speak Spanish to save my life, but I came in with at least a basic knowledge of verb conjugation and things like that. Spanish is, it's really nice because once you can get a handle on conjugations and genders and stuff like that, it makes speaking it a lot easier. One thing to remember when you're learning Spanish is it's all with the tongue. When you speak English, it's very guttural, kind of back here in the throat, but when you speak Spanish, it's all up front in the mouth. And I remember one thing our MTC teacher had us do is he would have us read scriptures, and we'd put a pencil in our mouth. I don't know how that helps, but I know it helped me at least with pronunciation. Another thing that really helped my pronunciation, it was a blessing in disguise because I really did not enjoy it at the time. There were 4 guys from my district in the MTC that we all went to the same mission. And of the 4 of us, I was the only one who had a trainer that didn't speak English. Most of my companions were from Central America, and most of them didn't speak English very well. And so, but the other 3 guys that I came to the mission with all had gringo trainers. And I remember when I was getting trained, I was so jealous of that and almost resentful because I was like, these guys have it so much easier. If they don't know what they're doing at the store or, when they're talking to someone, they can just turn to their companion and ask him in English. And I didn't have that because my companion didn't speak English. And so it led to a lot of struggles at the beginning. But I noticed that as I progressed through the mission, my Spanish was a little better, at least my pronunciation, just because I had companions from Central America through the whole first year of my mission, which, like I said, blessing in disguise, because at the time I was not happy about that, but it really did help my Spanish to be a lot better. One thing that is super nice about Spanish is English is weird because we have all these different sounds and silent letters, and it's just weird. In Spanish, every letter is pronounced, and every letter only has one pronunciation. So I still remember someone telling me that English was weird because if you look at Abraham, it has 3 A's, and all 3 A's make a different sound. But in Spanish, that is not the case, which is really nice, especially when you're learning it, because even if you can't speak Spanish, and even if you don't really know what anyone's saying, you can read Spanish, because it is always going to say the same thing. And so I would recommend relying on that. I know that I relied very heavily on that at the beginning of my mission to be able to share scriptures and things like that, just to prepare myself, because I knew that when we got into a lesson, I could read that scripture and be able to do it well to the point that people would understand me, even if I couldn't necessarily express myself very fluently. One thing that was sad is there's a lot of phrases that we have and idioms that don't transfer over to Spanish. So things like, blow them out of the water, holy cow. Although a lot of the gringo missionaries would say Santa Vaca, just because it was funny to us. But yeah, you have to be careful and make sure that what you're saying is actually a phrase in Spanish. Also, don't be afraid to check things with your bishop. If your companion gives you a word that you've never heard of before, don't be afraid to ask your bishop what it means before you start using that publicly. One thing that was interesting with the language is every country kind of has different words that are considered vulgar or bad. And so you'd have missionaries come from Mexico or from Guatemala or Nicaragua, and they come to Honduras, and it was really funny because sometimes an investigator or a member would say a word, and this elder from a different country would just be shocked. And just in Honduras, it doesn't mean the same thing. And so make sure, I remember one time the district leader called me to ask about a convert, and I used a word that I had heard my, one of the members of the ward used. And this elder was just shocked and got mad at me for, picking up vulgar words. And I said, well, I heard it from a member. And he was from Mexico, and apparently in Mexico that was just a horrible word. But in Honduras, not necessarily the best word in Honduras, but it wasn't, the same level. And so make sure when you're picking up new words, make sure you're verifying where those words are coming from and what they actually mean. Just because you don't want to be in a situation where you use a word incorrectly. Also, you're going to have an experience where you mess up the words. I remember there was one time we were teaching a Catholic man, and he was asking a lot of really good questions, and it was a great lesson. And this was even halfway through my mission, so I was at the point where I felt like I had a pretty good grasp on Spanish. And I remember he was asking about confession, and so in Spanish he said, "Eldres, ¿qué creen ustedes de la confesión?" And for some reason, I heard, ¿Qué creen ustedes de la concepción? So I thought he was talking about the Immaculate Conception. And that was a very awkward moment because I started to go off into this whole thing about, what we believe about Mary, and just I was talking about conference talks and what people have said, and just kind of, it was, and all of a sudden my companion bumped me. He's like, what are you doing? And I said, well, he asked about the conception. And he's like, no, he didn't. He asked about confession. And so you'll have those moments where you just mix up a word and just laugh about it and move on. So I remember one time we were teaching this investigator, and this was a powerful moment for me in regards to my testimony, especially regarding prayer. So we had this investigator, and she was fantastic. We'd already had a number of spiritual experiences with her, but we couldn't get her to come to church. We're really struggling to get her to come to church. And I remember we'd set a baptismal date tentatively, but we needed her to start coming to church. And she played softball, which down there actually is very rare. Like I said, normally people play soccer down there. Excuse me, but she was a softball player, and I know one of the reasons she was struggling to come to church is a lot of their games were on Sunday, and we had decided we had made a lesson the night before. We planned we're going to talk about the Sabbath day, and we're really going to nail home, that you need to start coming to church. So we went, and we felt good about this lesson, and we taught it, and we did all this stuff, and she said, I really want to come to church, but I actually have a game this week at 9 a.m., which is when church was. And we were like, well, is there any way you could, just this 1 week, just come to church? Because we knew if we could get her there, it would be a good experience for her. And she said, well, I can't let my team down. Like, I'm the starting catcher. It's really important. And so we said, well, what would need to happen for your game to get canceled or postponed? She said, well, the only reason they cancel the games is if it rains. And we said, all right, well, we're going to we're going to pray. It's going to rain. And in Honduras, this was in the middle of the summer. It's not as common to get a lot of rain in the summer. You'll get little storms popping up, but they only last for 15 minutes. It's just not common to get a big storm that time of year. So she kind of laughed, and you could tell she didn't think it was going to happen. And I want to say that was on Thursday or Friday, something like that. So we went home and we said, okay, we told her we're going to get a rainstorm. So we started a fast, and we fasted the next day, and we were praying, and Heavenly Father, we really need this rainstorm. We really want her to come to church. And I remember we figured, if this game's going to get canceled, it needs to start raining Saturday. And so I remember we woke up on Saturday morning, and we're thinking, okay, this is the day. I went out and looked, not a cloud in the sky. Just the bluest sky you've ever seen. I thought, that's okay. It's Honduras. Storms blow in all the time. And so we got up, we went about our day. About lunchtime, we had lunch, and then we came out, and still, not even a cloud in the sky. And it was a little disheartening, but we said, nope, we're going to keep praying, we're going to keep going, and we went through our lessons that day, and I remember about 4 o'clock, we went into a lesson. Like I said, still blue, no clouds. We came out of that lesson, and it was just the blackest sky I think I have ever seen. Just out of nowhere, in 40 minutes, this massive storm had just rolled in, and it just started to pour. And I was never so happy on my mission to be that drenched. We were just soaked through the rest of the night. And I remember it rained through the night. And then we woke up in the morning, and storm was over. And we went to church, and in walked this investigator, and we were super excited. And she came in and sat down next to us and said, remind me to never ask you guys to pray for anything again, because good grief, it definitely happens. That was a cool moment for me, just that God does answer prayers, and He is definitely listening and wants to help the missionaries. One story that was super crazy. So we had one of the 70 was coming to our mission to talk, and the area that I was in was a 12-hour bus ride away from the mission home where the 70 was going to be, the area where the 70 was going to be speaking. And so they had said that they weren't going to bring in the missionaries from the areas that were really far away. They were going to have our zone leaders go and then give us a training on what was said. But my companion and I really wanted to go. And I had problems with ingrown toenails throughout my mission, and I had one that needed to get taken care of. And my companion needed a temple recommend interview. And so we said, okay, well, if we're going to talk to the APs, we're going to say, look, this is why we need to come, because, we're doing this. So it's just convenient to come up when he's here. And so we got permission to go. And so I remember we got up at midnight and got dressed and went to the bus station at 1 a.m. and got on the bus, and we were exhausted, but we're super excited because we were going to get to go to this zone conference with the 70. And about halfway there, when we had gotten on the bus, there was this older lady and her grandson had gotten on the bus. About halfway there, all of a sudden the bus stops. We were kind of in the back, so we didn't know what was going on. And we stop, and we're just at one of the bus stops, and we're just stopped for I think we were there for an hour and a half. Just a really long time. And about 40 minutes into waiting, we're like, well, this, normally we stop at the bus stop for about 10 minutes, and then we're off. So we went up, and this grandson and his grandmother were on the way to San Pedro to go to the hospital. His grandma was sick, and she'd actually passed away on the bus, which was definitely not something I expected to happen. And so we had to wait for the police to come and, kind of help the grandson out, take care of the body, and crazy things will happen on the bus. that I was not prepared for. One thing that's really different in Honduras is Christmas. So up here in the United States, obviously, the big thing is Christmas morning and the 25th itself. But down in Honduras, the big thing down there is the 24th and Christmas Eve. And they love firecrackers on big holidays, and especially Christmas. Christmas and New Year's, both that kind of time. And man, sleeping on the 24th is nigh unto impossible because there's just firecrackers going off all night. And I remember my last Christmas in the mission, we managed to go to sleep, and we woke up exactly at midnight because it sounded like we had been dropped in the middle of a war zone because of all the firecrackers that were being set off. So many and so loud. I think we didn't end up going back to sleep just because we couldn't sleep the rest of the night. Because they set off firecrackers all night to celebrate Christmas. It was pretty funny. Another thing with Christmas is you will eat so many tamales, and they are so good. I miss the sweet corn tamales of Honduras. Yeah, so delicious. But it would reach the point. It was one of those things where it was like, you'd start having people offering you tamales towards just after Thanksgiving. And at first you'd be super excited and you'd eat just so many tamales. But then towards Christmas it started to be like, okay, these are really good, but I've had 4 today and that's a lot. But then you wouldn't have any for almost a year. And by the time they came around again, it was super exciting because you hadn't had a tamale for a long time. If I could give any advice to pre-missionaries, especially those of you who are going down to San Pedro, like I said, just enjoy your missions. You're going to have some really, really long and tough days. Some of the moments on my mission are some of the hardest moments that I've had in my life. You're going to have days where everything goes wrong and it just feels like the whole world is stacked against you. But at the same time, the days that I remember now are the moments when miracles happen. And you'll have so many of those experiences. One thing that we were challenged to do in my mission by one of our area presidency was to keep a book of miracles and just keep track of all the miracles that happened. And it's incredible to me to look back on my mission, go back and read my mission journals and just see how much God was looking out for me and helping me to succeed. It was not me. I can tell you that much. Elder Lewis is not much of a force on his own, but just don't forget that with God behind you, you can do anything. It's not easy. Like I said, you're not going to immediately grasp the language necessarily, and there's going to be rough days, but He's there, and He's looking out for you. Another piece of advice I would say, kind of along the Book of Miracles, keep a journal. I am a horrendous journal writer, but my mother constantly, before my mission, told me that if I did not keep a journal, that she would disown me. And so I did a pretty good job at keeping a journal, and those journals have been a huge blessing in my life, especially in moments when I've been down, to be able to look back at those and just remember the blessings and the miracles I experienced on my mission. I think a lot of us mistakenly we confuse just stoicism with righteousness. And have fun on your mission. Don't be stupid. Don't walk around making fun of people or doing things that are insensitive. you are a representative of Jesus Christ, but at the same time, I don't think Christ, when he was walking the earth, was walking around frowning, For those of you going to Honduras, the people are fantastic, and enjoy that, Talk to the people, learn from people, listen to their experiences. You are going to meet some amazing people on your mission, no matter where you're going, and just cherish it. Those 2 years are some of the best experiences of my life happened to me on my mission, and don't let those moments pass you by because you are too busy to enjoy them. I learned so much on my mission, and I am so grateful to my Heavenly Father that I was able to serve for 2 years in San Pedro and in Honduras. And I know that this church is true. I know that the work that you are about to embark on or have embarked on is of God, and you have the ability to change lives. Don't forget that it is God who's changing those lives, and you are an instrument in His hands. But I know that He's looking out for you. I know that He and His Son appeared to Joseph Smith and restored the true gospel to the earth. I know that the Book of Mormon is true. I know that as we read and study the Book of Mormon, the Lord will bless us. I know He's our Father and He loves us, no matter what we do. And He's looking out for you, especially as missionaries. And never forget that.